Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are joining us from around the world. It's wonderful to have you here. It's wonderful to have Bill Eddy here. Thank you again for taking your time out of your busy day, and thank you again, Bill, for joining us. Let's jump right in. And today I have the pleasure of interviewing Bill Eddy for, what is it? This is our fourth interview. As always, my promise to you is you will be able to walk away with techniques that you can apply straight away. In this case, in this webinar, we're focusing on professional BIFF responses for people who blame others, who present all or nothing thinking, have unmanaged emotions, and present extreme behavior or threats. And this work, we're tapping into the expertise of Mr. Bill Eddy, my guest, guru, mentor, and friend, who I had the pleasure of meeting, I don't know, it's six years ago now, I think, Bill. Welcome, Bill.
Well, thank you so much. And I think it's 8 or 9 years ago. I think we met at a conference 8 or 9 years ago. So it's always good to be on with you again, Tess.
Yes, yeah, it was, we met in Melbourne and I attended your workshop there, and then we're on the same flight to Canberra, and I chewed your ear off and I did your workshop on bullying there, and the rest is history. So
that's right.
I'd like to congratulate you, Bill. You've had such a productive year with your writing in the last 18 months. You already had a phenomenal body of work, and you've just seemed to have taken it to a new level. Do you want to just tell our listeners a little bit more about your last year?
Well, with COVID, I stopped traveling. So I was home and doing Zoom seminars from my home office and guest room, which you can see behind me. Welcome everyone to our guest room in San Diego, California. But because I had a lot of time, I had books in my head that I wanted to get down and get them out. So I actually worked on 5 books, all of which then were published within the last year. One on a second edition of a book on high conflict divorce called Splitting. We got a new book on co-parenting in divorce, which was BIFF for co-parent communication. Then I believe it was February, we published BIFF at Work, co-authored by Megan Hunter, who's the CEO of High Conflict Institute. And then in June, we got out Mediating High Conflict Disputes and a new approach for dealing with high conflict cases. And July, we got out Calming Upset People with EAR, or ear statements. So BIFF at Work was one of 5 books that we worked on.
It's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. So this is BIFF at Work has come out as a new edition, and it's kind of the next iteration or next journey from your original book, BIFF. And you've split BIFF into, I guess, audience spaces. So you've really made it contextual for, in this case, people in the workplace, and your other versions of that book. What are some of the other audiences that you've now created a standalone book for in BIFF?
Well, what's interesting with BIFF, the first BIFF book, which you interviewed me about several years ago, which we first put out in 2011, was for anybody. It was a general audience. We had neighbor examples, workplace, divorce, family, intact family, adult child and parent emails, etc. So then we did the second one was BIFF for co-parent communication, because a lot of high conflict divorce cases really needed to calm down the email correspondence. But second to that is workplace, in terms of where you see a lot of hostile emails, misinformation flying back and forth. So the third book is this BIFF at Work. So it's the second group in priority for BIFF responses, because there are so many workplace opportunities for misinformation and hostility to be kind of unloaded when people are under stress, and certainly with COVID, people have been under stress. So we wanted to get BIFF at Work out, and it seems to be good timing.
Well, I'm without a doubt sure it's going to be as popular as the early editions. And last month we had 368 views of the original interview, and it just keeps going up every month. So these are views on YouTube, and the other interview that we one of the other interviews that we've done, What's Your Proposal, is getting over 1,400 views a month now. It's just crazy. And so I'm really, really thrilled that your words of wisdom are really touching a chord with people, and that we're able to share these techniques with people, and it makes a difference in people's lives. We're getting comments in email, we're getting comments in YouTube about these techniques, and we have to say that they are not going to work every single time, because every single situation is different. There's no one solution. And I also want to say this is not about diagnosing someone as a high conflict person. These techniques are really beautiful techniques that you can apply in many situations, and you don't need to sit down and diagnose if someone's a high conflict person. And I would encourage you not to do so, or tell someone, and Bill will talk more to that. But before we jump into the interview, can we warm up your fingers? We would love to get your questions as we go, and can you jump into the question box? So we're going to warm up your fingers, and can you tell us, lovely people, where you are joining us from? I know we have people registered from Australia, New Zealand, the US, Canada, and there's someone from Germany, I think. So as always, Bill, you attract an international audience. So warm up your fingers. And so we've got New South Wales. Hi, Tiana. Hi, Diana. Hawaii. Hello. I didn't say that very well. Canberra. It's lovely to see you here. Welcome from Melbourne, Tracy. Brisbane, Canberra, Brisbane, Tasmania. It's lovely. Hi, Kate. Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for warming up your fingers. Now, please ask questions as we go. I might not always see them, or I might sit and wait on them because I know we might be talking about them a little later on. But Bill is very happy to take questions as we go. So let's get moving. Okay, here we go. A hostile attack in the workplace, we've all had it, and they can be quite confronting. And I've extracted this example out of a book. I've just taken a little bit of the context out of Bill's book. I don't like having to do this, but you forced me to bring it up. You constantly withhold important information from me when you knew I needed it to get my part of the job done. Is it because I complained about the boss? Is it because, whatever it is, do I not need this information? It's not fair. I have to have it. I'm done. We've all heard it. We've all heard it. And this is one of the examples from the book. And we feel quite accused. We feel quite attacked. We often feel quite blindsided. We don't know how to respond. So Bill is going to be sharing his wisdom with us. But first, I want Bill to take us through, this is from the book, I want Bill to take us through the personality continuum overview. Over to you, Bill.
Yeah. So generally what we see is most people are low conflict people. Some people are medium conflict and some are high conflict. And people say, well, everybody's high conflict at certain moments. But what I find helpful is to look at the pattern of behavior. So when people are high conflict, a lot of the time they have a pattern. It tends to include this all or nothing thinking, extreme behaviors, unmanaged emotions, and blame, 100% blame. And when someone 100% blames somebody else, then they're not taking any responsibility themselves, and therefore anything they contribute to the conflict isn't going to change. And so what we've learned is we kind of have to manage both ends of the conflict, that we need to be calm and help ourselves just communicate information. So we lower the hostility level to a calm problem-solving level. And so kind of recognizing what you're dealing with. If somebody has a moment that's not good, they may have some insight into their behavior. But if they're high conflict a lot of the time, you need to forget about trying to give them insight and just address the immediate situation and the problem and maybe a solution or at least information that they need to know. So a lot of it is not getting into an argument and escalating as high as they go, but staying at a reasonable level. So when they go up, you stay here by just giving a BIFF response that's brief, informative, friendly, and firm. But people with high conflict personalities are the ones most likely to attack you. And they come on with intense emotions that can be quite jarring and tempt you to write 10 pages back to them or to blast them with, no, you're the idiot, buddy, and to say that. But we've learned that doesn't help at all. So that's why we develop BIFF responses.
And I think one of the things that it's important to recognize in the workplace is sometimes you might see behavior that's quite out of character for somebody, and they may not be a high conflict person. They may have a lot going on in their life. And we're probably seeing this more with COVID and the challenges of our current working environments and workplace and the stresses that people have been under. And it might mean that they have a lot going on right at this moment. It doesn't necessarily mean they're high conflict. But we often don't know what's going on for somebody else. And many people tend to keep things to themselves. And so the nice thing about the techniques that Bill is going to take us through is they actually calm people down, even if they're not a high conflict person. So it's really important not to categorize people as high conflict, but these techniques work regardless.
Yep. Anybody who's upset or just misinformed. Yep.
As Bill's already alluded to with the first bullet point, he has in his book the 4 Fuhgedaboudits. And I love the way Bill says it with his accent. Can you take us through the 4 Fuhgedaboudits and why we need to forget about it?
Yeah, so we call them the 4 Fuhgedaboudits so that people will remember them. Because it's a fun expression. Hey, forget about it. So trying to give them insight into their own behavior. If somebody usually doesn't get real extreme in their behavior or emotions, etc., they might have insight, but you don't have to go for insight. So what we say is just forget about trying to give insight, focus on what to do now. Also, focusing on the past, if someone's a high conflict person, they often get stuck in the past and they're reworking the past. And it seems like that's one of the problems. They don't get over the past. They don't grieve and heal the past like 80% or so of people do. So if you focus on the past, you're kind of opening up stuff that's unresolved for them. So we want to focus on the present and the future. Likewise, opening up emotions. If they don't grieve and heal emotional losses, that means if you focus on their emotions, they'll actually feel worse. And so we don't try to open up that. We acknowledge emotions and then focus on thinking, focus on tasks. And the last thing is forget about labeling them, anything. Labeling them high conflict, labeling them personality disorder, labeling them a jerk, labeling them as an abuser. All those labels tend to trigger defensiveness. And that's why we focus really on what to do and what information to provide. So a BIFF response usually just includes some neutral information, and I'll get into that soon. But those are the things, by forgetting about those, you avoid a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
And it also means the BIFF response doesn't have to be very long. It can just be a paragraph. That's what they usually are.
And I think for me, once I learned in particular about forget about focusing on the past, we have a tendency to want to sort of throw up an evidence-based but you did this, but you did that. To me, once I sort of really got in my head about not focusing on the past and really focusing on the future, it made it so much simpler. It really like, oh, I can move on. You know, they're in the past. Why do I have to stay anchored there? Let me move on. And that was just a really lovely release for me to go forward.
It just saves a lot of argument because people rarely agree on the past.
Mm.
And that's something we get into at times. People want apologies for the past. And we go, well, I'm not going to apologize. I did the right thing. You did the wrong thing. No, you did the wrong thing and you need to apologize. And it's just like, let's skip over all that and talk about what to do now.
Okay, let's talk BIFF. Bill, take us through it.
Okay, so BIFF responses are brief. And like I said, usually just a paragraph is sufficient for a BIFF response, 3 to 5 sentences. It doesn't put too much out there to trigger the other person to get a big reaction from them. So brief is good. And when I was developing this, I remember meeting with a human resource manager at a 2-page response to some issue with a former employee. And she said, so do you think I covered everything? And I said, actually, with a BIFF response, you're trying not to touch on everything. You're just trying to calm the conversation and wrap it up. So brief is good. Informative. Informative is just straight information. Who does what, where, and when, often logistical information. You may not be aware this and this and this are the details. This is what's being done. This is where the supply chain is hung up right now, but we expect within 10 days that will be relieved and the supply chain will be moving again. So just straight information like that. You don't want to give your opinions. You don't want to give defenses. And the reality is when you get defensive, it makes you look guilty. And so don't get defensive here. Just straight logistical information and then, wrap it up. Friendly, so you want to have a friendly tone. That calms so many things. Someone attacks you, just turn it around into positive energy and respond in a friendly tone, like, thank you for bringing this to my attention, or have a good weekend. Now, this can't be sarcastic, so if you don't mean have a good weekend, don't say have a good weekend. But sometimes it just puts a nice calming effect. And then firm, that you end the hostile conversation, that you're not feeding it by saying, so what do you think of that, buddy? You don't want to pull them back in like that. So just end the hostile conversation, just peacefully. You give your information, you do it briefly, friendly, and you're done. Now, sometimes you need a piece of information or a decision. And so it can still be firm if you ask a yes or no question and say when you'd like a response. Please let me know yes or no by Thursday at 5 o'clock. And that's it. It's that simple. It's a little harder to practice, but after you practice, it gets simple. And when you read the book, by the time you're done, it's kind of drummed into your head. Oh yeah, brief, informative, friendly, and firm.
And I love the way that you've got all the case studies in the book, and then you've got, is it brief, is it informative? So you ask these questions and you analyze an actual response that's not BIFF, and then you have a response that is BIFF. And the structure is beautiful to navigate. It's easy to follow. So I really, really encourage people to buy the book, and we have the link at the end, but the structure is so easy to pick up what you need from it. I think one of the challenges really is keeping things brief. When you first start writing brief BIFF responses, you're so wound up, and it's like, I need to get this out, and you're slamming the keyboard, and then you go, okay, breathe, 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 and it's like, get a buddy and check it, and a couple of times I've had people check my emails and gone through it and gone, And Bill has a particular method to analyze an approach. So I go, boy, you really worked up. And so, but yeah, it's like the challenge is to keep it concise, but Bill guides you really beautifully through this and helps you land in that sweet spot that you can actually do a beautiful BIFF response that de-escalates. We've got a couple of questions here.
Oh, great.
This is from Julie. What ideas would you have for managing a family member who's high conflict personality? And in this case, I would have it, I've been a target because I have aspects of high conflict personality, but the haha moment recognizing these patterns. So this is tricky since my sister and I have a history of escalating conflict. I'm navigating a new way of engaging now, how to be present while reframing about a novel shared vision. So recognizing the patterns, what would you say to Julie?
Well, you don't have to figure out a pattern. The thing is to respond to the communication that's right in front of you. And so just understanding about the high conflict personality pattern, I think, is helpful as background information. But you don't have to make any decisions based on that. What you do is say, oh, this person is sending me a hostile email and they're looking for some information. So I'm going to reply just with the information. And I'm not going to add hostile words, even though they had hostile words for me. And I think that's the key, is being able to figure out what's in what they're writing that simplifies it. And what's interesting is, you were talking, Tess, about the BIFF checker. So we kind of go through, is that brief? Is that informative? Is that friendly? Is that firm? And so when you check yourself, you can see, is there anything hostile in here? So you don't have to figure out the other person, just respond to the communication. But here's another tip. When we wrote the BIFF for co-parent communication, I had 2 co-authors on that. And one of them, Kevin, said he had a client, or maybe he just developed this, is take the email you receive and rewrite it as a BIFF communication. And then you'll see what's in there that you need to respond to. And so often there's one sentence to respond to, like someone wants some information and they say you're an idiot and why did it take so long and all that stuff. You just eliminate all of that and you go, oh, she wanted a piece of information. I'm going to give her a BIFF response with that information, and then we're done. And it's all good, clean, simple communication. So figure out what you do need to respond to and just respond to that, and that'll help you keep it brief.
When we've run workshops with Bill, and Bill gets us to do BIFF responses, it's actually quite hilarious because we'll write the first response we want to write, and then he'll get us to turn it into a BIFF response, and then we have to buddy up and coach each other or use a BIFF checker. And it's such a beautiful, fun, but safe way to navigate coming up with a response to real life situations. I also just want to share with you, Bill, that Julie, who asked the question, said, thanks, Bill. I did this during the conflict and I drafted my first BIFF. Her BIFF response has actually led to her sister agreeing to go into mediation.
Excellent.
Yes.
Excellent. We see a lot of this in families can really help. In work relationships, etc. It brings things down. Now you can do problem solving. It's like, okay, we're here where the problem solving is, instead of up here where it's just anger and noise.
Yes.
So it's so good to hear.
We've got another question from Tamara. I hope I've said your name properly. And it's, does it have to be friendly? Or is it friendly to work on myself as well and stay cool? But let's go back to, does it have to be friendly?
My experience is it has to be at least a little bit friendly so that you're shifting it from hostility to at least neutral. And so if it's just, thank you for letting me know your concerns, that's often enough. It doesn't have to be super friendly, doesn't have to be chummy and chatty. It's just what you want to do is calm the conversation so it doesn't keep going, that you just add to it. Because we've all seen, especially on the internet and comments, and everything just goes downhill if you get angry back. And it stops being about solving problems. So I would say yes, not super friendly, but at least a little bit friendly. Let me add to that, if anybody else is going to be reading it, that's even more important, because they might just say, oh, it's two high conflict people arguing with each other. So unless you add that little bit of friendly, it just looks like you're a high conflict person as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So Julie just said, great idea. She's going to pair back the original email and see if she can identify what that piece of information is. So that's awesome. So Tamara, yes, you have to be friendly to yourself as well. You've got to look after yourself in the process, and hopefully these techniques will help you stay well and stay cool, because it de-escalates yourself as well as the other person. Okay.
Yes.
Let's continue. So brief. Well, we've been talking this through, so let's continue.
Yeah, so keeping it brief, like it says, is it's short. It avoids triggering defensiveness. That's what you're trying to do, because the more you write, the more there's a sentence, and they'll go, "How dare you say that one sentence?" And if it's 1 out of 20 sentences, they'll find it. But when you keep it brief, 3 to 5 sentences, you can be pretty good about keeping it clean, so you don't have anything in there to trigger them, because that's what often reacts. So brief will save you. And what's amazing is it saves you so much time and emotional energy, because I've seen people agonize over those 2 or 3 pages that they really don't need to write. Even if you got 2 or 3 pages, you can write back a paragraph, and that's usually sufficient.
Informative, which is what you're just saying before.
Yeah. And so it's just great information, not opinions, advice, defenses, all that other stuff. It's just great information. And if you think logistically, it's like who was doing what, when, and where, or who needs to do what, when, and where. And that keeps it simple. All those kind of, if it answers why questions, then that's, I mean, if it answers W questions, then it's informative.
I've often had people say, I've been taught to stay away from why questions. And I just want to I just want to qualify that. If you say, why did you do that? Why did you do it that way? It can be interpreted as accusational. So it's how you present that why. And so we can talk a little bit more about that a little later. Friendly, we've had some conversations around that. And here's some examples.
Yeah, so you can say, thanks for letting me know your concerns. Thanks for replying to my request. Those kinds of just brief thank yous. To start out, it puts a friendly tone. It puts it in a category of, oh, this is something that's a peaceful conversation, instead of escalating it.
And I often use that second bullet point, particularly that second sentence. You may not be aware, here's some additional information, let me give you some information that you may not have, because you're not saying they're wrong about something, you're saying, hey, there's a new piece of information here, so let's look at this. How does that change things? So it's just shifts the tone so nicely. It's wonderful.
It's funny when you read back a BIFF response to a really hostile, long email, you just feel the simplicity of it. And there's like nothing in there to get hooked with. And it's like refreshing.
Yeah.
And it's not always easy, but it's simple. That's the key. It's simple. And with practice, that gets easier.
Absolutely. Practice, practice, practice. Firm. Oh, I got a typo in there. Oops.
Yeah. So the idea, first of all, is this doesn't mean harsh. it means you want to just put an end to the conversation. So your information takes care of it. This is all I have to say on this subject. Just, this is it. Disengage from the conversation. If you need feedback or you need a yes or no answer, put a date, let me know by Thursday at 5. And if you need a response and you don't get it, then I'll have to do such and such. And I hope that won't be necessary. Something like that. So you're just really keeping it simple, brief, informative, friendly, and firm.
And the nice thing about letting them know what will happen, it's not a threat. It's simply managing expectations. If I don't have this information by Friday, I have to move forward without it, and this is what could happen. So it's, if they don't know what the next step is for you, sometimes they don't understand the importance of it. So it gives a little bit more understanding.
Yeah, like we need to get our project done by the 10th of the month. And if I don't get this information by the 8th, we won't have time to process it because it usually takes 3 days. Or just something informative like that. And that's also a judgment call. So you might decide, I'm not going to say anything except ask for this. And if they don't get it, then I'll do my plan B, whatever that is. So it's part of this is a judgment call, how much you say, how much you don't say.
Michael's just jumped in here and sort of is agreeing with something that you've just said. Anything other than adopting a BIFF approach is hard work. The high conflict person is drawing you in and making their problem your problem. So the BIFF, I agree, Michael, the BIFF approach just is so much less work. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's amazing, but often simple is better.
And so the thing is, the techniques we're about to show you, you can do, they're doable, they're simple and doable, and you can imagine that you're doing this. So you have got this, and we've already heard Julie talking about how she's applied. I have to tell you, Bill, Julie discovered our interviews online and she went through every single one of them, and she was like, she was so happy. She was so happy to have learned some of these techniques to apply. And so you've got this, you can do this, you can imagine yourself doing this, you can hear yourself doing this. And when you start to apply it, you'll go, wow. It doesn't mean it'll take away all the stress of dealing with a high conflict person, but it will give you techniques to do so you can exit out and you can be in a calmer space without getting drawn in and having their problem become your problem, as Michael just said.
Yeah, what's interesting is often a good BIFF response doesn't get another response. And so it kind of can put to rest that, which can give you more of a sense of peace instead of, well, how do I fight back with this next thing if there isn't a next thing? And let me just mention that sometimes you give your BIFF response and the other person responds with something else, and you feel like you have to add something. You might, but try to make your second response shorter and then not necessarily even do a response after that. We're going to have to agree to disagree. Best wishes. That's sometimes how you have to end the conversation. But you've got the 3 A's here, so I should talk about that. First of all, you don't want to trigger them. Now, abolishments, it's admonishments is the word we use. So don't admonish the person like, you should know better, Sonny. You never done that before. So that's what we mean, admonishments. Advice, usually the person asks for your advice.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's a little typo. That's okay. As long as people get the idea, don't talk down as an admonishment to somebody. Just skip that type of approach. Advice, people aren't asking for your advice when they send you a hostile email. And so the thing to do is just keep that out of there, because that often triggers the other person. And let me tell you, Tess, that when we see this the most is between generations. And so if you're in a workplace and now they're saying there could be up to 5 generations in the same workplace at the same time, and older generations and younger generations like to give each other advice that wasn't asked for,
Yes.
you know. So let me give you some advice, Junior. We've never done it this way, and it should never be done any other, or should never be done that way. And then Junior comes back and says, "Hey, Boomer," or whatever it is, and says, "What we really want here is to not do it. You know, you have to do it this new way. You don't understand how this new system works, etc." So what happens is you get people giving advice across generations and just upsetting each other unnecessarily. So give information, but not advice. Now, the third one is tricky, and that's apologies. We want to avoid apologies in BIFF responses. Now, apologies can be a great thing for 80% of people in most of their communication. And sometimes apologies resolve a whole conflict just with the apology. But the problem we see with angry people, with high conflict people, is that what they hear is all or nothing. So if you say, "I apologize for, you know, that little strategy didn't work over there, let's change the strategy, and I'm sorry that I recommended we use that approach," what they hear is you agree it's all your fault. And that's not what you're saying, but that's what they're hearing. So we've learned it's better not to apologize, and just stick with whatever information is needed at the time. And it's surprising, and I know often people speak with sorry, you know, "Oh, I'm sorry," and apologizing a lot of the time. But don't put these in writing, because then they carry it around and they pull it out when they have a disagreement. Say, "See, you agreed it was all your fault." Well, that's not what it said, but that's how they read it. So we find it's just simpler to keep it clean, avoid admonishments, advice, and apologies.
Absolutely. And it just keeps it so simple.
Yep. Keeping it simple is always a good. Keep the conflict small is something that I've learned over the last few years, especially, you know, high conflict people often escalate and bring in extra things, and you want to not do that. Keep it simple, keep it small.
So the book has a great structure. It takes you through understanding the high conflict person and drills down into BIFF communications for external audiences and BIFF communications for internal audiences, and then the coaching for BIFF, the BIFF checklist. And do you want to talk a little bit about that, Bill?
About the checklist, the
Yeah.
coaching? Yeah. So we encourage people to have someone else review what you've written before you send it. And so to help each other, you can coach, and anybody can coach anybody. You can say, "Hey, Tess, you want to look this over and tell me what you think?" And so what Tess should do is ask me 10 questions that are 10 coaching questions. And the 10 coaching questions, well, guess what? The first 4 are, is it brief? Is it informative? Is it friendly? Is it firm? And then the next 3 are, does it contain any advice, any admonishments, any apologies? That's 7. The 8th question is, how do you think the other person will respond to what you've written? The 9th question is, now would you like to change anything? And the 10th question is, now would you like to hear my opinion? So if Tess was coaching me, she would ask me those 9 questions and then say, "Do you want to hear my opinion?" That makes me have to look at my own writing and reinforces to me how I should write a good BIFF response. So the coaching you can really help each other out with that. And I was just with my wife a couple hours ago. There was a tricky letter that she's preparing to send, and so she had me look it over, and I asked her the questions. And it really is helpful, partly because you're teaching the other person, and they can then ask themselves those questions. And so, oh, and if no one's handy and you have to send it right away, ask yourself those 10 questions. The 10th, of course, being, do you want to hear someone else's opinion or not? So at least 9 questions you can do on your own.
Absolutely. We've got a question here from George. Presently in a conversation and the person is demanding an apology, keeps demanding with a count on how many days since they asked for the apology. How would you respond? I know you don't have the context, Bill, but
Yeah, I don't have everything, but what I would say is let's focus on the future so we don't have this problem in the future, because what I find with the past is if it's a high conflict if it's not a high conflict person, then you might apologize if you think you have a reason to apologize. So I want to make it clear, I'm not saying never apologize, but if you think it's a high conflict person and they want you to apologize, like for setting limits on them or not allowing them to do something that they shouldn't do, um, then I think it's better, let's not get into an argument about apologies. Let's talk about what to do now. What do you propose in the future as the way we deal with a situation like this? And that way you don't get stuck. I call it apology quicksand. With high conflict people, they demand apologies inappropriately, or when they should apologize, they don't. And it's just not worth getting into an argument about. Talk about what they propose to do now. Talk about the future, because you can control that. The past is over and done, and you can't undo it.
and they use it as a weapon. They weaponize your words against you. So it's like best avoided. And I love your suggestion, Bill. Future focused.
Yeah. Let me mention something here that's an alternative. Sometimes people say, I'm sorry to see you're in that situation, or I'm sorry to hear about that. And if you think you're dealing with a high conflict person, I would say in those situations, just replace sorry with saddened. I'm saddened to hear that, or I'm saddened that you're in this situation. And that way you can still acknowledge that it's uncomfortable for them, but without making it like you did something wrong. I'm not sorry like I made this happen. I'm just sad that you're in that situation. So I wanted to add that.
George says thank you. Tamar says, what if your proposal is not really fair or realistic? What if their proposal is not really fair or realistic?
You're talking about just a proposal in general, like in an email, is give the reason why that's not realistic. Say, thanks for making a proposal. And for this reason, I believe that's not realistic. So let's keep brainstorming. That's a BIFF response right there.
It is a BIFF
Brief,
response.
friendly, and firm.
And so the nice thing about that is you're keeping options open the way you frame that. You're keeping options open for more discussion. Let's explore this. You're keeping their head open to thinking more possibilities.
Yes, yes. And that way you shift it into problem solving instead of defensiveness. And it's like it's us against the problem, not me against you. And that's what you want to create.
Tamar, I think if you jump into the interview that Bill and I did on his book, What's Your Proposal, you'll actually get some really great suggestions there. It is the most popular interview that I've done with Bill so far, and it's full of great information. So go have a look there. It'll give you some more suggestions as well. So loving this engagement, everybody. Tamara's saying, love it. Thank you. Will do. Awesome. So brilliant. Loving this, loving this. Okay, so we've covered the brief informative, firm, and friendly, or friendly and firm. I always get the order back to front. We've covered the 4 Fuhgedaboudits, which are just magic, and the 3 A's. And so, do you guys feel as though you could start to apply some of this? I know some of you are already. I know Julie's applied some of this. If you can just jump into the question box, can you see yourself applying some of these techniques, some BIFF responses? I'd love to see your comments. And if so, when do you think your next BIFF response? This is going to be interesting. Do you have a current situation that you need to put a BIFF response to? Is it in the next couple of days? Or do you anticipate needing to do a BIFF response? Yes, 100%. Yep, fantastic. Love it. Thank you. Yes, thank you, George. So I'm glad that you're finding these techniques valuable. As always, Bill gives us amazing techniques, absolutely amazing techniques.
Now, do you want? I can give you a brief example.
Yes, please. Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Now, keep in mind, BIFF isn't just a response. You can start a communication with it as well. So we think of it now as BIFF communications. And the example I wanted to give, there's someone became a new manager, and one of the people, the other employees in the department, wanted the job, and they didn't get the job. And so they're undermining the manager. And I've seen this several times, especially if the new manager is younger, or if it's a female manager and the person that wanted the job was a male. So this is what we see sometimes. So here's her first statement, and we'll see if it's a BIFF communication. Dear Zachary, I hear rumors you're trying to undermine me and my new position as a department manager. This will not be tolerated. You must cease and desist immediately. Otherwise, I will consider disciplinary action or removal from the department. Am I understood? Nina. Now let's look at that. Is this statement necessary? Maybe, maybe not. This is the BIFF checker. Is this, so first question is, do I need to say something? Then we go through brief. Is this brief? Yep. Is it informative? Yes. It's saying what's going to happen. Is it friendly? Not at all. And if she's going to work with this person, this really helps add to an adversarial relationship. Is it firm? Will it end the hostile conversation? There's a good chance that Zachary's going to feel like he's got to have a comeback to this. So I would say it's not firm. Advice? No. Admonishment? Yes. And apologies? No. Well, let's see if this is better. And see, this is how the book is set up, is we have maybe not very good statements and then BIFF statements. Dear Zachary, as the new manager, I'm going to be meeting one-to-one with key team members in the coming weeks. Given how long you've been on the team, I'd like to meet with you in the next week. I'm interested in your ideas for how we can improve the department and any concerns you may have. I will also discuss some of my ideas. I'd like to meet next Thursday at 8:30 a.m. or Friday at 10 a.m. Let me know your preference by Monday morning. I look forward to a productive year. So, first of all, is this necessary? Maybe. And a lot of times when you're not sure, sometimes if you do a BIFF response, it is better to communicate. So she needs to get a handle on this situation and this guy. So I would say it's necessary. Is it brief? Pretty brief. It's 6 sentences, that's all. She explains what she hopes to address. It's informative, and her openness to his concerns. Is it friendly? Absolutely. This is far more friendly than the other statement. And is it firm? She said when the meeting will happen, it'll be one-to-one. And so that's just going to be the next discussion they have. No advice, no admonishments, no apologies. And I think that's a good BIFF response. And so many people are new managers these days, and they get hassled by people in a department, especially if they're coming in from outside the department. So this is an example of how you can get a peaceful start and managing a new department without returning hostility with hostility.
And when Bill and I were talking about which example to share in today's webinar, I really resonated with this one because one of my coaching clients had just been appointed in as CIO of a very large organization. And the guy that had been acting in this CIO role had also applied for it, and he missed out, and it got given to this guy who came in externally. And I got this coaching call for a coaching session. Tess, I need some help. I've got this 2IC who's I understand is really annoyed he didn't get the job, and I have no idea how I'm going to respond to it. And so in the interview, not in the interview, in the one-on-one that he had, he actually just said, hey, look, I'll be totally and absolutely honest with you. Look, I know this is awkward. It's awkward for both of us. You've been doing this role. You know how the organization works. I don't know how it works. You know, you wanted this job. I don't know how to move forward, and let's work out how you like to work and how I like to work, and let's make it work for us. And the guy said to him, he was dumbfounded because he was determined to give him a hard time, and he said, you were just too nice. You were too nice. and so he said, well, what do you love doing the most? And so they actually designed his role to be something that he would really enjoy doing. So but yeah, he had that BIFF. We had a couple of BIFF conversations ready for him for that first week because he was expecting a bit of a challenging start from some people. So yeah. Perfect, worked perfectly. So I've got a couple of comments. Michael says, certainly I have referred the BIFF approach to a family member who's dealing with a high conflict person. Fantastic. Kayleen has said, I found this webinar to be so valuable as it helps to reinforce how we should be responding. Thank you so much. Thank you, Kayleen. That's wonderful. It's awesome. Loving that this is valuable to you guys. And this recording, as always, will be going up on my professional development portal and the YouTube channel. So, Bill, what's next for you?
Well, the biggest thing we're working on and just launching possibly in the next few days is in family law situations. There's a lot of domestic violence, divorce cases, parent custody disputes, etc. And so we're going to be launching 6 one-hour videos, and we interviewed experts. We interviewed 16 experts, psychologists, lawyers, judges, people that run programs, people with shelters, police, everybody involved. We wanted to get the big picture of understanding domestic violence these days, especially in high conflict divorce cases. So that's the next thing, and that's coming up real soon. So if anybody knows somebody in a high conflict divorce or in a domestic violence situation, they may be interested. We designed it primarily for professionals, but it may be useful to anybody.
Oh, that sounds
research a lot.
That sounds fantastic, and it's lovely to have those different perspectives. If you want to get a copy of BIFF, you can get it from the High Conflict Institute or from Amazon or Unhooked Books, and I will be sending these links out to you with the link to the webinar recording at a later date, hopefully this week. So I want to get captions done for it first before it goes live. Not automated captions, people who can spell, not like me. I'm not quite sure, Bill, if you have time for one more question and then we run away.
Sure.
Okay,
sure.
Katie, you're in luck. So Katie says she identifies as being a high conflict individual, and she wants to apply this method to her communication on how she responds and to better understand how she's perceived by others. I've just got to scroll it up and find my mouse. How do you recommend one responds to an individual that pushes back on asking for information, such as how are they pulling the data that they are presenting, and then they push back with the report or title name. When I, the high conflict individual, push back with stating I'm asking how they are tailoring or pulling the dates and details as this impacts the data, they respond and stating that they pulled the data, they used whatever from a higher level, at an executive level. At this point, I usually escalate out of frustration and anger. I keep losing my mouse. Here we go. What would you suggest I do for responding, as the data and information that presented seems often it impacts, reflects particular departments in a particular light to the business, and I want to ensure the data is presented fairly and accurately? So I think, so if I understanding this correctly, Katie, you're wanting to understand how you can respond to when someone's pushing a particular method back to you and you don't want to escalate. If I've caught that, just say yes. But Bill, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it doesn't matter where people are in an organization, that BIFF responses can help you stay calm while giving information. And so I think, like, if someone's lower down in the organization and getting pushed by someone higher up, is just repeating the factual information that you want to get across. This is, you know, we're finishing up the analysis. We'll get this to you within the next 4 days. So we thank you for your patience, or something. If there's something that you have to turn in and they're being harassing about it, is just straight information so that they know what's coming. But in general, it really doesn't matter where you're dealing with an outside customer, you're dealing with an employee, you're dealing with a supervisor, just keeping it straight and calm and matter of fact. Let's say you're working with a good friend. How would you communicate it to your good friend? And do that with the people on the job.
Mm.
So, and also we have this thing about giving yourself encouraging statements, is tell yourself something to help you stay calm. And it's not about me, it's just the difficult person is being difficult. So I'm just going to give the minimum information necessary without sounding nasty. Mm-hmm. And that's the friendly part. And 90% of the time, this will help calm the conversation. As Tess said early on, nothing works 100% of the time. So give it a try, and you may find it works most of the time.
So, and I think Tara, so Katie was saying she's the high conflict person. She's the one that reacts. So she's trying to work out how she can respond back when they're pushing this information to her.
Yeah. Well, let me say, if someone believes they're a high conflict person, they may or may not be, but this is a method that anybody can learn. And we teach this, for example, in high conflict divorce cases. We teach it in our method called New Ways for Families. We also teach this in our workplace method called New Ways for Work. And it's to really help calm people who might be potentially high conflict. And this is an excellent skill to learn. If you're getting feedback that people think you're a high conflict person, then give BIFF responses back, and they'll show that you really do have good management of yourself, and that you're being reasonable.
So, Katie, I think it's a little bit hard with limited information to give you a really spot on response. Just drawing on something Bill said earlier, if you can look for that one piece of information that's missing for you and or for them, and focus on that, see if that might help. I'm not sure. I think because there can be a lot of noise around everything else. So if you can identify that one piece and then work out how you can do a BIFF communication around that, or a BIFF response around that. I hope that helps, Katie. We have gone a little over, just very quickly. We've got some lovely messages. Thank you. I have to leave, but very valuable. Thank you, Tamara. It's been very helpful. Thank you from Michelle. Thank you, Tess and Bill. That was so insightful. Tamara, thanks for the presentation, George. We'll be applying these techniques a lot. Thank you, Govind. Thank you so much. I wish I'd been aware of this 4 years ago. I'll be looking to incorporate these principles in my daily communication in general. Thank you, Lavinda. Thank you, Govind. Exit book is worthwhile read and a great book to have. Thank you, Govind. Thank you so much, Tess and Bill. Lovely to see your happy face, Tess. Hope to talk to you. Thanks, Chris. Lots of lovely messages. Thank you. Thank you, Bill and Tess. I'll shoot all these through to you, Bill. It's just really lovely. Um, and Katie just said, yes, you've got it accurate. You're spot on there. So thank you. So thank you, Bill, once again for an awesome Tess and Bill collaboration. I love it as always. And I'm looking forward to your success stories with your videos. It's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, well, I look forward to staying in touch, and I'm so glad with all of your interviews. You've been a great interviewer, and it's always fun working with you. So thanks so much.
Thank you. Have a lovely day, and love to Alice.
Okay, I will. And pass it on to Martin.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye. Have a good week, everybody, and thank you for joining us. Thank you for investing in yourself. I'll catch you later. Bye.